show, atheists I talk to, I talk to atheists. I would give them the answers. I will refute their answers. And they refuse to believe the truth. They refuse to give up. Now, here's the thing. I understand that atheists like to say to themselves and to others that they are convinced that the universe is logical, that we should be rational, and then they say Christianity, for example, is irrational. But when I demonstrate rationality to them, they demonstrate to me irrationality. I want to know something. If you guys are so objective in your desire to know truth, why do you reject this whole argument of rationality and truth itself? You can't refute it. No one has. Why is it? What's going on with you that you don't want it? That's my question. Oh, done.
I know you wanted to shift gears, Matt. I don't. I actually want to continue with what we were talking about before because it's important. The argument that you made a moment ago does take the fallacy of division. To say that logical absolutes are transcendent and logical absolutes are conceptual and are absolute, and then to say that they're conceived of by a mind, therefore the mind, there has to exist a transcendent and absolute mind, is now, you countered that by saying that if it's conceptual, that and different minds contradict, concepts can be different from one another. Yeah, that's all true, but that's beside the point. Different minds can conceive of an apple, but that doesn't stop an apple from being what it is independently of minds. For example, let me ask you, how does Christianity account for people thinking illogically?
Christianity accounts for people thinking illogically by what's called the doctrine of the noetic effect of sin, from the Greek naos, mind. The noetic effect of sin is that sin has corrupted the mind, and so therefore we expect people to be illogical. And atheists under sin demonstrate that very clearly. It is not a fallacy of division to say that logical absolutes are conceptual and that therefore must be a mind behind them. There is no thought that exists. There is no truth that exists. There is no statement that exists without a mind. Logical absolutes are truth statements, which you yourself said are conceptual by nature. Please explain to me how a logical absolute that's conceptual by nature can exist without a mind.
Right, but that's not what you're saying. You're arguing that logical absolutes are conceptual, therefore they must come from a mind. I mean, mind, but an absolute mind. That's the fallacy. That is something that you have not demonstrated.
Whoops. Okay. Here's the thing. Okay. Here we go. The Christian perspective can, from its philosophical position, purple turtle, it can postulate within its perspective of it. He didn't even know it. I'm thinking about writing an article about it, but I said at the beginning of the show, I said, look, some of the atheists argue with me, and they'll say that logical absolutes are conceptual or physical, and they'll say there's a third option. I'll say, well, what is the option? And he says, well, there isn't one. I said, they said to me, we don't know if there's a third option, and that's how can we know there's a third option? And he said, well, that's ridiculous. And then he said the very same thing, contradicting himself, using the rationality itself from the atheist perspective. Here's the thing. The Christian can account for logical absolutes. How? There's a God. He's the author of logical absolutes. He's a transcendent mind behind them because they are transcendent by nature. They are conceptual by nature. They are nature. That is how we account it. There's a Christian God. That's how. The atheist cannot in any way, shape, or form account for the transcendent, absolute nature of these logical absolutes. That's the argument. So therefore, atheism is a false assumption. Go ahead.
Well, Matt, I don't know if you noticed, but you just contradicted yourself by saying that God authored logical absolutes when before you said that he does not author them, but they are a part of his nature. Now, I'm sure that was just a slip in you that came about in the Dillahunty exchange. And it's really important. And you said a few things. You said that if you cannot say what something is not. I agree with that, but it's important that that's something that you assert. And here's why it's important. I would like to ask you, what category of existence does God fall under? Is God conceptual by nature?
God falls into the God category. He has revealed himself in the Scriptures as being holy, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, and eternal. This is the category that belongs to God in his nature and his essence alone. So their function. They can always operate with the Word of God, which simply says what God has revealed to us. Yeah, we can give you what category he is. That category which he himself describes. Now, you may not accept the answer, but it's certainly consistent and logical with what I've been holding and saying. Matt Delahanty made the mistake of saying, I don't know what the other option is, but there is one. And think about it. If I were to say to you, or you were to say to me, well, is God this or that? I don't know what he is. I don't know. Then would you accept that? Probably not. But the atheist will accept it from an atheist. There's inconsistency here. Back to the tag argument. The tag argument argues from the impossibility of the contrary. You only have two assumptions to work from. Theistic, I'm not going to get into pantheism, panentheism, distinctive. It assumes physicalism and or materialism. Both of these are basically saying the universe runs off of natural principles, chemical reactions in the brain produce our thoughts, produce everything. There would be therefore no logic, no free will, nothing. You'd be nothing more than the result of the chemical reactions in your brain. This perspective cannot account for logic. It cannot do it. It's possible. The perspective, on the other hand, I don't even have to prove it can. By the impossibility, the contrary, Christianity is already validated. But I can demonstrate to you that the nature of logical absolutes being transcendent, absolute, and conceptual, it's perfectly rational to say there's an absolute conceptual mind, transcendent mind behind them. Nothing illogical about that at all. My perspective can account for it. Yours can't. Therefore, tag is validated.
But Matt, I don't want to let you off the hook that easy. I do want to stick with the nature of God's existence is God. Okay, well that's fine and sort of circular and kind of meaningless because you're including the definition of definition. You said that you know what God is, but no you don't. You know what God's not. You know quite a few things that God is not, but you don't know the substance of which a spiritual being like God is. Go back to what you said before, which again I think is really interesting. How can you know what something is not if you don't know what it is? So how can you know, Matt? And
if that's the third option, then he's no longer an atheist. Yeah, I do know what God is. I know what God is. He is that spiritual being that encompasses the universe and created it. We know things by knowing their attributes, by observing their attributes. You don't know the essence of something in an experiential way. You know the essence of something with your mind getting around it. So if there's a ball on my desk here, and I pick it up and it's rubbery and I can crush it with my hand to about half its volume, then I can assume certain things about its characteristics and its nature by looking at its attributes and experiencing them. Same thing is self-disclosing, and this could be in the Bible, discusses things about him, and we can therefore know things called the communicable attributes of God. What you're trying to do is mix up what's called the non-communicable with the communicable attributes of God, and say that all things are in the non-communicable attributes of God, therefore God is not knowable in any way. Not true. Theologians have already gone through this for centuries. Communicable attributes. Yeah, we can know certain things about him, and we certainly can. He is loving, part of his nature and his essence. He is honest. He's true. He is non-self-contradictory. He is eternal. These are things I can just clearly state. Now, you have to accept them, but my perspective and my Christian worldview certainly offers an account for them. No problem.
Okay, now I'm asking you something about God's ontology, what God is, and you're telling me what God does, you're telling me something relating to God's ontology, and that's really important because we can do the same thing with logical absolutes. We can show the ramifications of logical absolutes. We can show what logical absolutes do. God, can you tell me the mechanism by which God does something? The mechanism by which God creates something. Can you tell me the you put a word God towards to fill in the blanks of all these things that you don't know. It's not what does, you know all these other things, but you don't know what God is. And that's really, really important. Taking your reasoning to its own logical conclusion, you must the existence, which you call God, actually means.
Otherwise,